Hi everyone, you're all really welcome here this evening to our webinar, which is Helping Your Child Cope with Anxiety. My name is Siobhan Harvey and I'm the Parenting Lead with the ISPCC, and I'm joined here this evening by my colleague Niamh Clark, Community Engagement Manager, and our guest speaker Katie O Donoghue, who we're absolutely delighted to have with us this evening. So I'd just like to say thank you all for joining us and being here with us this evening. In a moment, I'm going to talk just a little bit about ISPCC, our services and programs, before I introduce Katie and before she goes on to talk about her anxiety. Firstly, just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. You may have noticed that all participants have been placed on mute and their cameras have automatically been turned off. So we're going to stay that way for the duration of the webinar. We will be having a Q&A session at the end. So if you do have any questions during the webinar, please pop into the Q&A function, which is at the top of your screen, just further on from the chat button, and pop a question in there, and we'll get to them at the end. And we hope to get to as many as possible. If by any chance we don't get to answer your question, please feel free to contact us afterwards. We'll have all our contact details up at the end. Or alternatively, you might feel comfortable asking a question, and that's absolutely fine too. And you can just pop us an email and we'll give you the contact details at the end as well. And just a little reminder that this evening, this webinar is actually being recorded and it will be made available on all ISPCC digital platforms. So just a little bit about ISPCC and who we are and the programs that we do offer. A lot of people may be familiar with our Childline listening service, and this service is for children and young people up to the age of 18, and they can access this service via phone and online chat. We also have our Childline therapeutic support service, which provides therapeutic support to children and young people and families. We can meet with these families anywhere they feel comfortable, so it might be in their own home, it might be online, or it might be a local community centre. And for this service, we have various locations around the country. We have a number of programs that we offer in schools and within clubs. So our first one is our Smart Moves. And this is a transition program which aims to support the emotional resilience of children as they prepare to transition from primary school to secondary school. We also have our Shield, and this is an anti-bullying program which aims to support organisations in their efforts to proactively manage bullying. Some of our newer programs are our digital mental health and wellbeing programs, and these are aimed at reducing anxiety for children and young people, and digital programs for the parents and carers managing their own anxiety while supporting their anxious child or teen. And Katie's going to do the presentation in a little bit around anxiety. We also have those programs to offer, so if you feel after this you might like some support for yourself or for your child, just link in with us and you can find out more about these digital programs. Then some further supports that we have for parents and carers is our Parenting Hub, and this can be found on our website, and this publishes articles in relation to parenting and support on a range of different topics. We also have a support line that's opened from Monday to Friday, 9 a.m. to 1 a.m. And this is a listening service where we offer advice, support, and information and emotional support to parents. And you can contact the support line by calling 01 522 4300. For any more information in relation to any of the service that I just briefly spoke about there, you can log on to www.ispcc to find out some more information. So now, to introduce Katie, who we're absolutely delighted to have here this evening. Katie is a children's author. She is a child and young people's therapist with a background in fine art and design. She's a master's degree in art psychotherapy and is in the end stages of a health psychology PhD. Katie has experience working therapeutically in health, charity, research, and educational sectors in Ireland and the UK. She's the author of The Little Otter Who Tried and The Little Squirrel Who Worried. Katie is going to talk to you about anxiety and how it affects us. She'll also focus on increasing your knowledge and help you learn coping skills to support the child in your life, leaving you with a toolkit of resources. So Katie, we're absolutely delighted to have you here this evening. You're very, very welcome, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Siobhan. It's lovely to be here again with you all tonight. So let me get started. Okay. So thank you so much to everyone for being here tonight and Siobhan for introducing me. So our aims for this evening's webinar, as we said, what I want everybody to go away with is a better understanding of anxiety and how it affects us. and knowing when we actually might need to get further support for children, learning more about coping skills which we can use ourselves and share with the children in our lives. And again, having a sort of a toolkit of resources that you can turn to when you feel that a bit of support might be necessary. I suppose the past few years have been very hard on everybody's mental health, particularly children. And I think this stat sort of says it all, really, that in the last 3 years, the likelihood of young people having a mental health problem has increased by 50%, which is huge. One of the ways a child or a young person can be affected is anxiety. So what is anxiety? Well, actually, anxiety is a normal bodily reaction. We all experience anxiety. Anxiety is the mind and the body's reaction to perceived stress, dangerous or unfamiliar situations. And it's that sort of sense of uneasiness, distress, fear and dread that we can have sometimes before a significant event. In a way, anxiety, for example, when we were cavemen, was kept us safe, kept us alert, kept us out of danger. So there is a positive aspect to it, but the other side of it is when anxiety causes us to suffer in a way that can be completely debilitating. That is when we need to put in place coping skills and when we need to get support. What makes children anxious? So big significant events, like we mentioned, things like moving house, moving school, or starting a new school. Maybe at home, parents fighting or arguments, death and bereavement of a loved one, a friend or family member, illness in the family, school-related issues, so exams, bullying, abuse and neglect. These are all reasons for children to become anxious. There are different types of anxiety, and I suppose we've seen quite a few of these, particularly over the past few years. So separation anxiety, there was definitely a heightened degree of when children were returning back to school after lockdowns. Maybe as parents you experienced it, children feeling very uneasy about leaving you. The social anxiety definitely increased as well because they were going back into social situations after long periods of time being at home in a small little bubble. Health anxiety, we were all worried about COVID. And then there is general anxiety of this feeling of being anxious and not always knowing why we're anxious. And there are things like phobias. So fear of spiders, for example, can be a good example of what a phobia is. And that's a form of anxiety. Now, anxiety itself, as we mentioned, is a bodily reaction. And this happens when we feel anxious. Our brain is telling us that there's something to be fearful for, and it releases the hormone adrenaline. And what that does is it pumps the hormone into our bloodstream through the nervous system, and it causes us to go in the body and to go into fight, flight, or freeze. And why that happens is that the blood moves from, say, stomach and brain and into our larger muscles, so in our legs and our arms, and that's why it can sort of cause some funny feelings, which we're going to talk about a bit later. But for example, when someone is anxious, we might tend to notice. So it's good to reflect on, because sometimes we might have a specific way of presenting ourselves as well as our children when we're anxious. So some people might go into fight where they get quite angry, almost aggressive. Some people go into flight mode, wanting to avoid it, run away from the situation almost. And then there are others who go into freeze, feel like they are unable to move or maybe unable to respond if someone's asked them a question. Anxiety in the body. So it can cause many uncomfortable and scary physical symptoms for a child. There's an example of some of them up here: headaches, upset tummy, butterflies, dizziness, can be feeling that their palms are sweaty, their heart racing, their breathing becomes rapid. Maybe you might realize yourself that these are certain ways that you feel, and we're going to look at a bit more at the physical sensations. But what is important is that we become aware of this and that our children become aware of, so that they can notice when they're starting to feel anxious. A lot of the time, if we can explain to children why they're feeling this way, it takes away the fear, particularly for young children who might feel, for example, that their heart is pounding, and some say, oh, I feel like I'm going to die. And it causes a lot of fear, which then sort of increases the level of anxiety. So what we want to do is almost acknowledge and validate the feeling, but bring cognitive awareness to what's happening, which is quite hard to do. So what I have in it, for example, and a little exercise you can do at home with your children, which can be quite helpful. What I like to do is, I call it the gingerbread man exercise. So an outline of a gingerbread man, you can get them off Google, you can print it off. And I like to ask the child, when they're not feeling particularly worried at that time, so maybe during the day or before dinner, not too late, not too close to bedtime, to ask them, maybe was there a time that they might have felt worried, and give them a selection of colors, pencils, and ask them, if they were worried, did they feel it anywhere in their body, and let them color it in whatever color they want, in whatever shape or pattern. But what that does is that draws, it externalizes those feelings, but it also helps create awareness so that they're able to name. And I've done this exercise with many children now, and it's quite amazing from even a young age how a child can tell you, yes, I felt my worries were in my tummy, or my head hurt. And it's quite powerful, really, exercise to do. With regards to the little squirrel, if you're using the book as a resource, I've also, especially maybe at home, if you don't want to use a gingerbread man, you can print out a cartoon image of one of the animals and ask them to think about, if they were the squirrel, where would they feel worried? It's just another example of that type of exercise, but that can be quite useful. And it also is a springboard for communication about how they're feeling. So the CBT model of anxiety, our thoughts, our feelings, our behavior, our physical reactions regarding anxiety, they're all interwoven. So let me give you an example. A situation, it's time to return to school, maybe after the holidays. The child's thoughts, oh, I'm worried about going back to school, maybe nobody would like me. The feelings, I'm feeling worried now. Going across to physical reactions, I have pain in my tummy. Behavior, I want to avoid school, I'm going to tell mum I'm not feeling well. And that just gives you an example of, in a way, sort of the interlap between our feelings, our behaviors, our thoughts, the physical reactions. But what it also gives us information about is that if we're able to, say, for example, address the thoughts or address the feelings, maybe we can stop the impact on the behavior, or vice versa. And we're going to look at that a bit more later. Some signs to look out for that may be anxiety. A lot of the time we might not be aware that what we're feeling or what our children are feeling is anxiety. So these are some examples just to keep an eye out. So a common one, always worrying, or maybe expressing negative thoughts, finding it hard to concentrate. So when we're anxious, the cognitive part of our brain actually turns off. So you can't concentrate, you can't learn something new if you're feeling anxious at that time. Not sleeping, or maybe difficulty getting to sleep and then waking during the night. Being irritable and angry, and like we've mentioned, complaining of headaches and stomach aches are quite popular for young children. Tense or fidgety, needing to use the toilet, for example, is also one that can be missed out on. And the reason for that is, like I said, the blood moves from our, say, smaller muscles like the sphincter in the bladder to our main muscles in the legs and the arms. And when that happens, then there's like a weakness, and that's why a child might need to go to the toilet more. So that's something to look out for as well. Not eating properly because they're having those butterflies, those anxious feelings in their tummies, and always crying. The physical symptoms, panic attacks, one of the more serious aspects for a child with anxiety. And that can involve having the racing heart, breathing very quickly, sweating, shaking, shallow breathing, or feeling like they can't breathe. sick feeling in the stomach. Some children say that they feel like they have a dry mouth or that their throat is closing and they can't talk. Sweating, tense legs, wobbly legs, as mentioned, needing to go to the bathroom, or sort of symptoms of IBS, feeling very warm, very hot. Ways that anxiety impacts thoughts and feelings. So sometimes children can then become, because they're experiencing a thought or a physical response to something they're fearing, they can feel upset, scared, and have negative thoughts about themselves or situations, nervous, frightened, very worried, worrying so much again that it's difficult to sleep or concentrate. Now, coping behaviors. So as human beings, in a way, we're very resilient even at a young age. So sometimes we might look for ways to cope. The problem with these ways of coping is that they're not always beneficial in the long run. So for example, a child might, because they are feeling socially overwhelmed or experiencing social anxiety, they might try and withdraw from their peer group or isolate themselves. They don't want to go to school, be in those group situations, and maybe sometimes to create feelings of safety, sort of actions or rituals that sometimes can be called obsessive compulsive behaviors can be put in place because that gives a feeling of safety. But then if they don't follow out those compulsions, they feel very anxious, eating more or less than usual, and sometimes self-harming. The anxiety cycle, I think this is important for parents to know and understand, because a lot of the time it's so hard to see a child in distress. For example, if a child is really upset about going to school, and we might say, okay, look, just maybe for today we'll have a day at home together, and maybe sometimes that's okay. But what can happen is, for example, if we look, we can actually sometimes be helping to, I suppose, perpetuate the cycle, keep it going. And what I mean by that is the perceived danger. A child doesn't want to go to school, they're feeling worried, and maybe there's an exam. They really want to avoid it. So they managed to convince you, oh, I don't feel like going today, maybe I don't feel well. So they avoid for maybe those few hours that day. Great, brief relief. But what we've actually ended up doing there inadvertently is sharing a message that actually there is something to be afraid of here. And therefore, when they go back, as you can see, if we go back into the cycle, the next time they have to go into that situation, their anxiety is actually grown. So easier said than done, of course. It's incredibly hard to see any child in distress, but we're going to look at ways that maybe we can, so the next time that situation happens, we can go, okay, what do we have in our toolkit? What other ways can we address and support the child, rather than saying, okay, we can avoid the situation for today. So typical and maybe normal fears. So for very young children, being separated from parents, caregivers, and loud noises, those are all kind of normal fears. 2 to 3 years of age, different animals, maybe a dog approaching a child for the first time, the dark, thunder, lightning, the heat of the fire, going for a bath, the water. 4 to 5, getting lost, the thoughts of monsters under the bed start to happen. 5 to 7, illness, natural disasters, school. And then we come into sort of 7 to 12 and we start to think about performance anxiety, spelling tests, results at school, being around friends in social situations, trying to make friends. And what can we do when children are anxious in that moment? So we mentioned earlier that when a child is in full sort of panic, anxiety, cognitive part of the brain sort of goes offline. So in those moments, you're not going to be able to implement a new form of deep breathing or let's try a relaxation, because they can't. The cognitive part, the thinking part, in a way, has gone offline. Think of it as a computer. So what we can do is try and help them to regulate by modeling that for them. So sit with them, offer that calm sort of physical safe space, model breathing slowly and deeply, and try to encourage them to do so. It's not always easy because they've come into a pattern of the shallow breathing, but to sit there, reassure them that you are there, that this will pass. Keep breathing, taking long, slow, deep breaths and helping them to co-regulate. You can ask them to think of a safe place, say if you're not at home, or if they're by themselves, you can tell them in the future, maybe think of a relaxing place or a safe person in their mind. And then say if a child likes to draw or paint or hold something in their hand or squeeze something, encourage them to do things that you know with your child helps them to feel calmer. So that's when a child is in a state of anxiety. Those are the things that we can do. Okay. Now, how can we help our children to manage anxiety? So there are things that we can do. So when a child is calm, so their thinking brain is alert, they can learn, they're open to trying new things. It's something we need to practice with them and do it over time. Once won't be enough to learn these different coping skills. It's something that we have to practice, like learning a nursery rhyme or learning our times tables. We have to do things even as adults again and again and again until it becomes like a second nature. And that's what we want to try and give to our children, so that when they are feeling distressed, they can call upon those skills that they've learned. So having strategies and coping skills are ways to support them. And there's so many different types. And what every child is different. And what I say is that it's about exploring what works best for them. You know your child best. And some children will like one aspect of a coping skill and they will have no time for another, and that's okay. It's about finding what works for them to help them feel sort of the reduction in their anxiety. So in ways that we can help them to manage. So in a calm moment, again, not too near bedtime, maybe before dinner, or if it's at the weekend, during the day, maybe go out for a walk together to have these conversations. You can talk about, for example, helping them to recognize the signs of when they're getting anxious. For example, in the Little Squirrel Who Worried, there's different coping skills in psychoeducation, but one of the ways that anxiety is explained is through Squirrel and Hedgehog's conversation. And Hedgehog explains exactly what anxiety is, like we talked about, that it's the brain telling the body there's something to be fearful of, and that has an impact on, I suppose, the physical sensations in the body. And having that conversation, say if you were reading that part of the book first, and then you wanted to do the activity of the gingerbread man or using an outline of one of the animals, that would be a good way to help them recognize the signs of when they're getting anxious. Because if they become aware of their bodily sensations, that is anxiety for them, then they can think about doing the activities or the coping skills that help them feel less anxious. Spending quality time together and talking about other things. It doesn't always have to be about the worry or the anxiety. Just being together with you is such a joy for children and helps them feel safe and happy. Helping them to learn the relaxation activities. So we're going to look at these, helping them make and use a worry box, and the worry tree can be a fantastic resource. Helping them learn distraction techniques, and helping them problem solve and challenge their thoughts. And in the book as well, each animal encounter that Little Squirrel has goes through those different types of resources, which can be a great introduction in a sort of a light touch before you go in more in depth and do the activities. So how can we talk to children about worries? So reassurance, if a child is anxious, one of the things that we like to do sometimes is reassure. Everything's going to be fine. No, you'll be grand. Off you go into it. And we mean well when we do that. We've all done it. But what we're actually doing is dismissing the feeling of worry. So therefore the child kind of goes, he or she goes away and thinks, okay, well, actually, I'm still feeling this way. Nothing's changed. So the first step to do is to listen. We might not agree with what they're saying, but it's listening, giving them the space, acknowledging how they feel, and then, sort of saying to them, okay, look, I see how you're feeling. We can maybe try something, one of our coping skills that we've learned together. But say, for example, that they need to go to school, that that you're explaining to them that yes, you feel this way, validating them, but saying there, we do need to go and do this. So what ways and what things can we do to help you feel better about doing this? Sort of, in a way, bringing it back to the child to help empower them. So they're kind of problem solving and thinking, well, actually, okay, maybe if I pack my bag in the morning or the night before myself, I know what I'll be ready for school. So what we don't want to do is reassure them that, that everything will be fine and, they don't have to worry, because it, in a way, reinforces the behavior rather than sort of acknowledging and exploring, well, why are they feeling this way and what can we do? Now, so we're looking at some of the, I suppose, the coping skills for your toolkit. Now, distraction techniques. There are a number of them. You can try different ones. Different children will be more interested in one than another. That's fine. So, for example, I have up here the 5 senses. This can be a lovely one to do ourselves. It's very grounding because we're using sort of the sensory aspects to help bring us back to ourselves and listen to our body. So we can ask our child, and this is something to practice. You can do it on a walk, you can do it in the car, and something you can do anywhere. Ask them to find 5 things that they can see, and they'll name them all to you. 4 things they can touch, 2 things they can smell, and 1 thing they can taste. And as I said, that helps ground because they're using the senses to bring them back to their body. There's other types too, though. There's using the alphabet. And so, say, for example, if someone has a real interest in football, using the letters of the alphabet to name all the players, or using the letters of the alphabet to name loads of animals, or whatever your child is interested in, that can be a great distraction technique. Another one is the worry jar and the worry box. The worry jar is a great way to help children, in a sense, manage worry, and this can be one that you help them make at home. And it's important that they make it, and it's lovely if you can support them in making it, but to decorate it and to know that it's just theirs and it's safe. And when they put down their worries, the worries are in a way contained, they're externalized, they're pushed away time when they can share them with you. And what I say is, maybe if there is, depending on your child, you know your child best, but it maybe once or twice a week, if you have allotted, say, 10-15 minutes for your child to open the jar, bring out all the worries that they've been putting in throughout the week. And maybe you can do it twice a week if your child is worrying quite a bit. Maybe there'll be weeks where they don't want to look at the worry jar at all. That's okay too. What is nice about the worry jar is not only does it gives your child a chance to externalize the worry. So like ourselves, if we're going to bed thinking about something, it's going around and around in the head. I always say, have a pen, a paper near the bed almost, and write it down. Get it out of your head so you can get that night's sleep. But for the child, they will be going back over their worries. And some might still be relevant, but often a child will take out a worry and say to mum and dad, actually, I'm not worried about this anymore. And that's a great moment to sort of, reaffirm to children and ourselves as well that things do change, worries do pass, and it validates that for a child that yes, there might be things that we're still worried about, but maybe we won't always be worried about them. A great other resource that you can do, and you can again Google it online, is the worry tree. And the worry tree is a printout of a tree that sort of gives a bit of a diagram of when you take out the worry, what questions can we ask? and the answer yes or no. And that gives the opportunity for problem solving, which, as we mentioned in the previous webinar, problem solving is a fantastic way to build your child's resilience. So very much sort of the resilience coping skills and the anxiety coping skills, they run in parallel and they intersect as well. So what I definitely recommend is looking at having the worry jar at home, and also printing off your worry tree as a way to sit down, that space with your child for them to have a look through their worries with you, but also using the worry tree just to sort of help them reflect themselves and see what ways they might be able to problem solve. Relaxation techniques. Now, there are many. Some children, again, prefer some rather than others. Just like ourselves, it's each to our own. There is many apps. There's apps like Calm, Headspace. There's YouTube videos in which, so for example, visualization, it can be sort of mindfulness-led, almost meditation, in which someone with calming music speaks you through sort of a story, a journey that you imagine in your head. And that can be great for people who maybe quite visual, and it can be very relaxing. What I would say is, if you don't find the person's voice relaxing, move on, because then you won't get the benefits. And the same for your child. Progressive muscle relaxation, I actually find, particularly with, just from my own experience, particularly with young boys, this seems to work quite well. Again, it's engaging with the aspects of the body. So it can be from toes up to head, or head down to toes, that we think about each aspect of our body, and then we tense and relax muscles. And it's like a body scan. You go down through the body, or up through the body, and tensing, contracting and relaxing muscles, and what that actually is doing. So as you remember when I talked about the fight and flight response, that all the blood goes to the big muscles. Well, what we're actually doing by tensing and relaxing our small, the big and small muscles across the body, we're sending a message back up to the brain saying there's nothing to be worried about right here. So it's almost vice versa reaction, but particularly for young boys, I found that they seem to be able to relax quite well after doing a progressive muscle relaxation. Again, you can lead your child in this. There are scripts online, or there's YouTube videos, or there's the information on the apps. It can be a very helpful one if a child is having difficulty getting to sleep. It just helps relax any tense muscles. And so, as we know, when we're anxious, muscles can also get tense. So it's really engaging those muscles, helping them to relax, in turn sending a message to the brain that it's safe to relax, and we can do so. Then we have deep breathing exercises. These are great ones to help, again, slowing down our breathing. Deep breaths in and out is again sending a message through the body to the brain that we are safe and that we can relax. There's so many different types, apps, YouTube, Google. You can explore together with your child, explore for yourself. There's some lovely ones available, and they're free. So I would recommend your child best and let them explore and discover what works for them. Thought challenging. Now this can be a harder one, I think, for us all in some ways. We get a thought stuck in our head sometimes, and we can be just like children, our own worst critic. But these are, I suppose, to take a note of them yourself, maybe if you wanted to write them out or have them with you for when your child is coming. Maybe they're feeling not so good about themselves, or they feel that nobody likes them, or they don't feel clever. Some of the scenarios that children will bring to you. But these are nice questions to be able to ask them, to have a think about. And these are ways we can challenge our own thoughts too. So helpful questions. If a friend thought about this themselves, what would you say to them? I find this one can really, really sort of put a light bulb for children, because they realize they'd never actually say these things to their friends. So why are they saying them to themselves? When did you last have a thought that wasn't true? So what we're trying to do here is we have thousands and thousands of thoughts every day, some not so nice thoughts and some nice thoughts, but not every one of those thoughts, the good or the bad, well, mostly the bad we'll concentrate, are true. So, we want them to have a think about, well, actually, maybe there's evidence that this thought isn't true. Is there a more helpful, kinder way of thinking about myself for this situation? I think this is a lovely, compassionate way to help children think about self-care and self-compassion and about how they can be kind to themselves with the way they think about themselves and view themselves. And again, looking at what facts or evidence might make me think this isn't true. So, for example, a child will say, oh, I have no friends. I don't make friends easily. And maybe there's an example of, but oh, weren't you at football practice and didn't you tell me you made friends with John? Some things that are presenting them facts so that then they can stop, question why their negative thoughts and see, is there a more realistic, it doesn't have to be, positive completely, but what we're looking for is realistic so that it's not so negative, finding a kinder thought for them to think about, really. And another lovely little creative exercise that can be just when you're sitting down together, can be very comforting for a child and just a way for them to express themselves too, is the all the things that make me feel safe exercise. And it's a lovely one to have then if you want to put it beside their bed at night. If they say wake up or they're finding it difficult to get to sleep, they can then sort of recap on all the things that make them feel safe. So I get them to draw the outline of a shield, and they can draw on it or write down particular words depending what they prefer, all the things, people, places that make them feel safe. So, when we're speaking about anxiety, even today, there's a lot about the fears, the worries, the scarier things, but it's also important to empower them with the feelings of safety. So, anxiety can be incredibly challenging for children, for adults, and it's finding ways to reinstill that sense of safety that we're looking for to empower them, to empower ourselves. Now, there are some cases where you may have tried everything, and you've done the distraction techniques, you've practiced, they know them, they do the breathing exercises, you've got your worry box at home, you make time to have conversations together, and you're just finding that the strategies aren't really making the situation better for your child, and that the anxiety is impacting their life. Maybe it's just complete, school refusal, or feeling very unwell because of the feelings, the anxiety is impacting, say, their gut, their stomach. They're avoiding people, and I think that's when it can be very helpful and important to go and seek professional help. So going maybe having discussions with school to see if they have noticed these sort of behaviors, or do they have these concerns, and going to your GP, who can signpost you to organizations like the ISPCC and other areas to support you. Some resources that I find are quite helpful, I suppose, particularly with dealing and supporting children with anxiety. So the Little Squirrel Who Worried, and that's my own book, but that is predominantly focused on anxiety. So again, it brings in the psychoeducation in child-friendly terms, helps them understand what anxiety is, helps them understand that everybody worries sometimes, they're not alone, that there's support, they learn about the coping skills, the worry jar, distraction techniques, relaxation, and thought challenging. And I think that the major take-home message for them is that, we can all be worried sometimes, but we don't have to worry alone. The Huge Bag of Worries is a fantastic resource for looking at dealing with worries and anxieties. and there's a few other, The Little Otter Who Tried. So that book predominantly looks at enhancing resilience, but they're wonderful, I think, to be used in tandem, because you're learning a lot of the coping skills in The Little Squirrel Who Worried, but The Little Otter Who Tried sort of reinforces and brings in new ways of thinking with regards and coping skills for resilience. So they can be quite helpful when they're being used together. I think no. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening. I know we're going to have some Q&A after, but I'm going to hand back to Niamh now, who's just going to run through some of the resources and signposting for you if you have any queries.
Katie, thanks so much for another informative session this evening, and I hope everybody at home watching has taken away as much as I have tonight. I have to just really shout out around the worry jar. I've used that tool myself in my own therapeutic work, and it's such a simple and really effective tool to use with young people. So that's something I used. And the gingerbread man as well is a lovely exercise. We actually have a similar tool that we use in our digital mental health programs, and we call it body mapping or body scan. And I think any of these kind of activities that are helping young people to kind of visualize where they might be having these big feelings and these big emotions are really effective with helping them deal with their anxiety. So yeah, they're great activities and tools. So lots of thought there to be able to use these activities for young people. So for everybody watching, I just want to remind everybody of our Supporting an Anxious Child digital programs that we have in the ISPCC. And these are guided self-care programs to help you and your child better understand anxiety and to minimize the stress that's often associated with it. And you will also learn useful strategies to deal with your own anxiety in these programs as well, if that's something that's coming up for you. And just, if I may, I'll just give a little bit of feedback, Katie, that was shared from a parent that we recently received on these programs. So one parent wrote in recently and said the program can be quite an emotional experience to truly reflect and put into writing your concerns for your child. However, at the same time, it is empowering in the sense that you feel you are taking action to understand what is going on for your child and how you can support them. This program has helped me to see that I am useful, but not the solution. And the solution is with my child too. And together we can make a strong team, but I need him to lead and not keep leading him. So I think it was very
lovely feedback.
Yeah, look, so it's, all this kind of work, working with parents or learning these tips and tools, how to help your young person can really be empowering. So we're going to move on to Q&A. So I'll just remind everybody, if you want to ask Katie questions, you can use the Q&A function up on the screen there. But before we do that, we'll just run through supports that the ISPCC have available. And Katie herself is up there. If anybody wants to contact Katie, you can go to Katie Donoghue Art at outlook.com. So Katie's details are up on the screen there. You can also use the ISPCC support line. So that's open Monday to Friday, 9 to 1, and that's 01522 4300. We have our parenting support email at parentsupport@ispcc.ie. And also we have our parent hub. If you go onto our ISPCC website and click into the parent hub, you'll find lots of useful tips and tools and articles there that might be helpful. And just to reiterate, we have our digital Ready Hub as well, that's up on the ISPCC website. And to reiterate, we have our digital mental health and wellbeing program. So lots of supports that are up there if people are looking for support for themselves and their child. And just again, want to announce that on the 9th of May, we are delighted that we will be collaborating with the Education Support Centres of Ireland and with Katie to deliver another professional webinar on anxiety. And this will be aimed at children aged between the ages of 5 and 12 years of age, and it will be based on Katie's books, The Little Otter Who Tried and The Little Squirrel Who Worried. So keep an eye out on www.esci.ie and the ISPCC websites and all our usual social media channels, which I am going to pop up there now. And you'll be able to register through ESCI and through the ISPCC for this webinar. So Katie, we're just going to move on to some questions, if that's okay.
Great, yeah.
Fantastic.
Looking forward to them.
Excellent. Always love to hear that. So the first one that's come in tonight is how do you help someone with anxiety and also be able to live around them without feeling overwhelmed yourself? So obviously somebody's working really hard there with a young person potentially. Mhm.
And yeah, and it can be, in all honesty, it can be hard if you are, living with someone and trying your best to support someone who's anxious, and maybe everything you're bringing to the table or trying isn't working for whatever reason. So what I would really say and stress that it is important is that your own coping skills. I mean, a lot of what we touched on upon today, it's interchangeable. It's not just for children, it's things that we can do for ourselves. Ensuring that you have self-care, because and I always say it, and it's easier said than done, I know, but it's filling your own cup, otherwise you can't pour out for others. So ensuring that there's a certain level of time for yourself, even if it's 10-15 minutes, where you maybe say to your partner or a friend, I just, if it's one day a week, is there any way that you can come over and take the reins, just for, so I can have, de-stress, shut down for yourself, read a book, take a bath, go for a walk. Hard to do in these busy days with work, with children, but it is really important. So it's try to carve out that time yourself, so that you can make sure you're looking after yourself.
Absolutely. It's really important, isn't it? It's like they say, on the airplanes, put on your own
Yeah.
mask first. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Fantastic. That's great. The second question in is, my child is starting secondary school in September, and I'm really worried about how she is going to cope with this change. How can I help her?
Okay. So I suppose there's, I'm just thinking there's a few things there. First thing that comes to mind for me is, I'm wondering why. What is making, whether it's mom or dad, where is this worry coming from? Has the child shared the worry, or is it something that you're preempting? And the reason I say that is because often as adults, sometimes there is, because we care, ultimately it's because we care, we sort of maybe jump to, we preempt, we jump to worst case scenario, that this is going to be terrible, this is going to be hard, I don't know if they're going to be resilient enough for this, or we have a particular worry. And it's quite funny, especially the work that I've done with parents, and they've gone away, and for whatever reason we changed their, for them to kind of acknowledge the way they were thinking and see what would happen. And often the child had no inclination of worrying at all. It's so sometimes if we express that we're worried, we're modeling to children there's a reason to be worried, there's a reason to feel fearful. Whereas actually maybe there's a reason. Understandably, these things, transition, change is hard, but it can be also really exciting opportunities. Sometimes anxiety and excitement can feel quite similar. That they both have an impact on our emotional regulation, but it's how we frame these things. So what I would be thinking is maybe to consider, whose worry is that about school? Is it ours, or is it the child's? And if the child isn't worried or hasn't expressed that they're worried, they really actually may well not be. So it's just about sometimes having a bit of a reflection and catching our own thoughts, and maybe challenging our own thoughts too.
Absolutely. Just so have a check in first with ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Katie. The next one in, I think you have covered, but maybe somebody missed this section of it. My child says she's getting panic attacks. So what practical things can I do in these moments?
Yeah, so we did touch upon that, but for anybody who maybe missed that, so when a child is having a panic attack, like I said, the cognitive part of the brain, in a sense, goes offline. So there's not a way to learn new skills in that moment. But what we can do is we can sit with them, we can be with them, we can tell them they're safe, we can reassure them that this will pass, and we try to model that calm using the deep breath, slow deep breathing in and out, so that the aim is and hope is that we can help them to co-regulate by modeling that for them. And then when they're in a calmer state, we can look at learning those coping skills so that maybe that it can help them to catch their anxiety in a sense before they get to the full panic stage. That's what we would hope.
Okay. So lots of useful tips there, because I think that can be a worry for parents or for carers when a young person does start presenting like that. They don't know what to do. So
No,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
very
it's very
scary
useful. Yeah,
for child and parent. But I think if as the adult, again, easier said than done. None of these things are easy, but
yeah.
it's about if we can show calm and model calm, that makes a child feel safe too. Whereas if we start to panic, which can happen, understandably, it's sort of reinforcing that there's a reason to be panicked. There's a reason to be fearful.
So they need us to be the anchor, hold them
Yeah.
steady. Yeah. Okay. Another one in now. So my child is avoiding school and they're saying they're having headaches, tummy cramps in the morning, and they tend to but these tend to disappear throughout the day. What can I do? She has great friendships in and out of school, so I'm not worried about any bullying.
It sounds like there's probably something making her a bit anxious. She probably does have great friends. It could be many things. It could be that just the social aspect sometimes can be a little bit, worrying. She may not even be cognitively aware of the reason she's feeling this way. But what I would do maybe is use some of those coping skills that we've mentioned to sort of like the progressive muscle relaxation, the deep breathing, getting the body to relax in a way so that they come out of she's in the fight, flight, and freeze response with the stomach ache. So trying to find a way to alleviate the fear and anxiety, giving her the coping skills. So when she recognizes she's getting the tummy aches, actively putting one of those coping skills in place to see if that could help her. Again, what I would say is, bring in those coping skills, practice that for a while. But if these sort of symptoms don't disappear, I would say go to the GP just for a checkup as well.
Just to make sure it's not.
Just to make sure. Yeah.
Okay. So another one has come in, Katie, for you as well. So a nice feedback. So thank you. That was a really helpful webinar. The worry jar is amazing. And do you find since COVID there is a rise in anxiety in children?
Yes, unfortunately. Conversations with parents, with teachers, there's most definitely a rise in anxiety, unfortunately. I think it's, definitely has a link to COVID and the experience, and I guess the fear that so many young children were experiencing and seeing their parents and their loved ones, fearful as well, being honest. But I suppose, but we now have an opportunity. We have so many resources at the tip of our fingers. There's many different, like all the programs, for example, the ISPCC are delivering. There's many ways we can try and support our children. There is definitely an increase in anxiety, but also I think there is an increase in awareness of this, getting support and putting supports in place.
So people can be more proactive about getting that support and hopefully get it at an earlier stage.
I think so. And I think even us as adults, the level of anxiety that we ourselves experience going through COVID, I think that gives us even more greater empathy as well for our children who are impacted by anxiety then and now too.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. That's fantastic. I don't think there's any more questions after coming in this evening. So I suppose what we'll do is we'd like to conclude tonight's webinar based on that, unless you have anything else you'd like to add, Katie.
No, just I can see, I know that the hand, the raised hand, that we don't have the means to, but if anybody does, that they can follow up with yourself, Siobhan, or get in contact, if there's something that they want to ask or follow up on.
Absolutely. So you can email us and you can ask us if we've missed any questions this evening. But Katie, what I'd like to say is a massive thank you to yourself and to everybody watching at home. And the draw for Katie's new book, The Little Otter Who Tried, which is an amazing book, an amazing resource for young people. And it will be done after tonight's webinar, and the winner will be notified by email. And all that's left to say to everybody is have a lovely evening and thank you for joining us.